As we think of the advent of character education, therefore where it all starts, the roots, probably one of the best ways to structure this sort of introduction is to unpack a definition. So I have a definition here that comes from James Arthur, who's written a lot of very, very helpful materials through the Jubilee Center on character education. And I'd like to use his definition in this particular post to start off our thinking on what exactly is the advent, the roots and of character education. So here's his definition. He says, character is a set of personal traits or dispositions that produce specific moral emotions, inform motivation, and guide conduct. Character education includes all explicit and implicit educational activities that help individuals develop positive personal strengths called virtues, with the aim of producing and promoting human flourishing. Now, obviously that's a mouthful. There's a lot in that definition. So let me just try to unpack. This video will be just slightly longer than some of the others. I like to unpack just the elements that are in the definition. So first of all, he says that character, well, he divides the definition in two parts. Character, what is character? And then character education, what is education of character? So about character, he says two things that are really important, I think. The first is that character is a set of personal traits and dispositions. So character is personal. It has to do with who you and I are as persona, as persons. When you change character, you've actually changed the person. So it's deeply tied to personal identity, and it delineates our traits and our dispositions. And the word trait, it's interesting. You think of the word portrait, what you actually look like. And the disposition, what is the position with regards to God, neighbor, to your experience, to reality around you. So traits and dispositions. Now, one important thing here is, and it can often happen that we confuse character with personality. And so we think, personality, introvert, extrovert, the different Myers-Briggs or whatever sorts of personality. Character is not personality. It's different. Character, whereas personality, for example, is morally neutral. There's no moral tag attached to being an introvert or an extrovert. Character instead is morally loaded. There is a moral tag attached to being courageous or to being a coward. So character is not the same thing as personality, although often the two can overlap in some way. We may investigate that a little further on. So first important point, what is character? It's personal. It has to do with who we are as a person. The second important thing that Arthur points out in this definition is that character produces specific outcomes. It's a deep internal state of being that conditions all that we do in thought, word, deed, and emotion. Now notice that character is not simply external conformity to action. It's not just ticking the boxes and doing some things, although that's a very important part. The outcomes that Arthur actually outlines in his definition are emotional, motivational, and then actional. So just let me give you an example of this, of virtue, in the particular virtue of orderliness. Now, if you have children, think of their bedrooms, think of their beds. Do your children make their bed in the morning? Is their room orderly? An orderly person who has a character that is marked by order, who embodies the virtue of order, will have ordered environments around them. Now, it's not just an internal imposition, make your bed or else, mommy's going to whatever, you don't get cookies after your meal. But so initially there could be some external conformity to rules, and that actually helps. It can create habit. But to recognize that orderliness is really part as a virtue of your character, what Arthur's definition says is that A, you need to be emotionally bothered by disorder and feel a sense of goodness when there is order. You just feel good about order and you feel bad when things are in disorder. 2, he says it has to do with desires. If orderliness is part of you, you will actually want to have order in your life, in the people and the processes and things around you. Now, of course, that can go to an extreme and become a vice in its own right. But orderliness produces emotions, produces desires, and then thirdly, it produces actions. So actions to actually produce order. Now, further on in another blog post, we'll unpack more examples of these. But just note for now that for character to be part of you, it needs to be an emotional involvement, a desire involvement, so volitional, and then an action. All three of those things need to be there to be genuinely part of your character and inbuilt virtue. Then Arthur moves on to the second part of the definition, which is about character education. So there's character, and what is then character education? He says it includes implicit and explicit educational activities. This is great. This means that there's hope that we can actually do something as theological educators to produce character in the lives, or to nourish character in the lives of our students. So what can be done? The definition says implicit and explicit. And perhaps it's more useful thinking educationally to think that the virtues that make up good character can A, be caught, B, be taught. There's an element that character is caught, and we'll unpack this later on in other posts in this blog. But the notion here is that character, a lot of character, is actually caught. So in a theological education, in the community, whether it's residential or online, I will also argue that an online community you can catch character online. So there's a positive community where students see examples, there's a culture of virtue, there's an inspirational influence that motivates and promotes character. Character education can be caught and taught. There's actually some educational experiences that you can structure, that you can design in and outside of the classroom to equip students with the language, with the knowledge, with the understanding, the skills and attributes that enable character development. So character education can happen, caught and taught, and therefore it should be sought. As theological educators, we should be seeking what we can do to promote this. And finally, the definition that Arthur gives us is that character education helps individuals develop positive strengths called virtues. And this is really at the core of the advent of the nature of character education. Virtues are central to the entire discourse of character education, as you've probably picked up already. And we will come back many times. So you can click on the tag virtues and see how many posts we're actually dedicating to think about the virtues as we think of character education and theological education. So that's all I'll say now, that character education has to do with virtues. And finally, this is actually the final point of the definition, is that character education promotes human flourishing. The more people exhibit good character and virtues, the healthier our society is. So it's not just the church, but it's society. And indeed, character education may be one of the key contributors of theological education to society, as we are positioned strategically to form the much needed leaders and followers and members of society that are men and women of character. Therefore, that's the definition. Very good definition, a lot in there. Read in it, read over it again. Use the comment box on the bottom of this page again to respond. Let's get a discussion going. Do you like the definition? Don't you like it? Is it rich? Can you think it can be improved? I'd be really happy to discuss this further with all of you. Thanks.